Every experienced gardener has the same story. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, sometimes only 5 years ago, they walked into a garden center, fell in love with a plant that looked perfect on the label, brought it home, planted it, and watered it carefully through that first season. And then somewhere around year 2 or year 3, they began to realize what they had actually done. The plant did not stay where they put it. The plant did not look the way the catalog photograph promised. The plant began doing things the label never mentioned. And by year 5, that gardener was spending entire weekends trying to get rid of something they had once been proud to grow. There is a specific kind of plant that causes this exact regret, and most gardeners never get warned about them until it is too late. They are not poisonous. They will not hurt your dog or your grandchildren. They will not damage your foundation or kill your trees. They will simply, quietly, persistently make your life miserable year after year until you eventually surrender and pay a contractor to clear them out, or until you sell the house and let the next family discover them. 11 plants. Every single one of them sold openly at garden centers across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom right now. Every single one of them rated highly on the visual appeal scale, with beautiful catalog photographs and enthusiastic descriptions. And every single one of them ranked by experienced gardeners who have actually lived with them among the most regretted planting decisions in residential horticulture. By the time we get to plant number 7, you are going to recognize at least one of these from your own garden, and you are going to understand exactly why you have been frustrated with it for years. Let us begin. Plant 1, mint. The plant every new gardener plants at least once. The plant every experienced gardener regrets planting at least once. The plant that turns up in nearly every conversation about gardening mistakes, in every gardening forum, in every late-night phone call between a frustrated homeowner and the friend who tried to warn them. Mint is the canonical regret of American residential gardening, and the reason is biological, not personal. There are dozens of mint species and cultivars, including peppermint, spearmint, chocolate mint, apple mint, ginger mint, and many others. All of them, every single variety, share the same underground habit. The plant spreads through aggressive horizontal rhizomes that extend several feet outward from the parent plant in a single growing season, sending up new shoots from every node along the length of the rhizome. What you planted as a single small starter plant in May becomes a colony covering 10 square feet by August. What occupied a tidy corner of your herb garden this year occupies the entire bed by next year. And within 3 years, mint has appeared in your lawn, between your patio pavers, under the deck, and in the cracks of your neighbor's fence line. The fragrance is, of course, what makes mint so tempting in the first place. The leaves release that fresh, recognizable scent every time you brush against them, and the idea of growing your own mint for tea, for cooking, for cocktails, for fresh sprigs in the kitchen is one of the most enduring fantasies in residential gardening. The fantasy is real. Mint is genuinely useful. The problem is simply that mint does not know how to be a small contained herb plant. Mint is biologically engineered to be a colonizer, and it colonizes whether you want it to or not. If you absolutely must grow mint, there is exactly one correct way to do it. Plant it in a deep container with no drainage hole touching the ground. Bury the container in the soil if you want the look of in-ground planting, but never let the rhizomes touch open soil. Some experienced gardeners use bottomless metal containers driven 18 inches into the ground. Others use heavy plastic tubs with the bottoms intact. The principle is the same. Physical containment is the only method that works. Anything less, and within 3 years, you will be fighting mint in places you never planted it. If you currently have mint growing in open ground and you want it gone, plan for a multi-year project. Cut all visible growth to the ground. Cover the area with thick black plastic, weighted down for at least one full growing season to block all light and exhaust the underground reserves. Hand dig any remaining rhizome fragments you find, and monitor the area for 2 more seasons afterward, removing any emerging shoots immediately. There is no faster method. Mint earns its reputation honestly. Plant 2, running bamboo. and specifically the running types in the genus Philostachys, the most commonly sold ornamental bamboos for residential landscapes. Bamboo is one of the most photographed and most marketed plants in modern landscape design, sold for screening, for privacy hedges, for tropical-style garden accents, and for sophisticated minimalist plantings. The mature visual effect is genuinely beautiful. The behavior beneath the soil is in many cases a property line lawsuit waiting to happen. Running bamboo spreads via underground rhizomes that travel laterally through the soil at remarkable speed, often growing 15 to 20 feet horizontally from the parent grove in a single year, and capable of penetrating 2 to 3 feet deep. Those rhizomes do not respect property lines, garden bed edges, foundations, septic systems, or buried utilities. They simply continue outward in every direction until they reach an absolute physical barrier they cannot get around. And even then, they sometimes find a way through small cracks or gaps in concrete and continue their advance. The legal consequences of an uncontained bamboo planting are increasingly serious. Several American states and many local jurisdictions have passed ordinances specifically addressing bamboo encroachment between neighbors, holding the planter legally liable for damage and removal costs on adjacent properties. Court cases over bamboo invasions have produced settlement awards in the tens of thousands of dollars. In some areas, real estate disclosures now require the seller to identify bamboo plantings on the property, the way other significant property issues are disclosed. What makes running bamboo especially frustrating is that the visual problem usually appears years after planting. The first 2 or 3 years, the grove looks contained and well-behaved. The rhizomes are extending underground silently. Then suddenly, in year 4 or 5, new shoots begin appearing 15 feet from the original planting, in the neighbor's yard, in the middle of the lawn, behind the garage, in the flower beds. By the time the spread becomes visible above ground, the underground rhizome system is already enormous and entrenched. If you want the look of bamboo, the responsible alternative is clumping bamboo in genera such as Fargesia or Bambusa. Clumping types form tight controlled clumps that expand only a few inches per year and never invade neighboring properties. They are slightly more expensive and slightly less aggressive in growth rate, which is exactly why they are not the species most commonly sold. If you must have running bamboo, install a professional rhizome barrier, a heavy plastic membrane buried 2 to 3 feet deep around the entire planting, with the top edge protruding 2 inches above grade. Inspect the barrier every year for rhizomes attempting to escape over the top. Maintain it for the life of the planting. 2 plants in, and I want to ask you something in the comments below. Have you ever planted something that you later deeply regretted? What was it, and how long did it take you to realize the mistake? Drop the answer below. The honest stories from real gardeners are some of the most useful content on this entire channel, and your answer helps the next gardener avoid the same mistake. Plant 3 Bishop's Weed, Agopodium podagraria, also called goutweed or snow on the mountain in its variegated form. Sold for centuries as a ground cover for shady, difficult areas where nothing else seems to grow. Beautiful in catalog photos, with delicate variegated foliage edged in cream and tiny white flowers in early summer. And quite possibly the single most difficult plant to remove that you will ever encounter in a residential garden. Bishop's weed spreads through a dense, deep, brittle rhizome system that extends in every direction beneath the soil surface. Once established, a colony pushes outward at 1 to 2 feet per year, displacing every other plant in its path through aggressive competition for light, water, and root space. The plant tolerates shade, sun, drought, flooding, rich soil, acidic conditions, and alkaline conditions equally well. There is essentially no growing environment in temperate North America where Bishop's weed will not establish and dominate. What makes removal so genuinely difficult is the brittleness of those rhizomes. They snap easily when disturbed, and every fragment left in soil regenerates into a complete new plant. Gardeners who attempt to dig out a Bishop's weed colony often find, 2 seasons later, that they have created 20 new colonies from the fragments they accidentally distributed throughout the bed while digging. Tilling the area makes the problem worse, not better, because the tiller blade chops the rhizomes into hundreds of small viable pieces and distributes them across an even larger area. Effective removal requires either complete physical containment of the colony followed by repeated mechanical removal over multiple growing seasons, or complete site sterilization with non-selective herbicides applied 2 or 3 times per year for 2 to 3 consecutive years. Either approach takes years. Neither approach is guaranteed. Some bishop's weed colonies are so entrenched that experienced landscapers recommend simply changing your relationship with the colony, accepting it as a permanent ground cover in that area of the garden, and giving up the idea of growing anything else there. If you want a shade-tolerant grounded cover, native alternatives like wild ginger, foamflower, or native ferns provide attractive coverage without the destructive habit. If you currently have bishop's weed and want it gone, contact a professional landscape company experienced in difficult invasive removal. This is not a casual weekend project. Plant 4, chameleon plant, Houtunia cordata. The plant that looks like an absolute dream in the catalog photographs, with heart-shaped leaves variegated in shades of red, pink, cream, yellow, and green, all on the same plant at the same time. The plant that promises to be a striking foliage ground cover for damp, shady areas where most colorful plants will not grow. The plant that, once you have grown it for a single season, you will spend the next decade trying to remove from your garden. Chameleon plant is one of the most aggressively spreading perennials in the entire ornamental nursery trade, and the spread is only the beginning of the problem. The plant produces deep, brittle, white rhizomes that extend several feet outward per year, behaving in many ways similarly to bishop's weed, but with one additional feature that elevates the regret level significantly. The leaves and stems, when crushed, brushed against, or even just stepped on, release a strong and genuinely unpleasant odor that most people compare to rotting fish, spoiled lunch meat, or industrial cleaning solvent. The plant is sometimes nicknamed fish plant for this reason. The combination of aggressive spread plus offensive smell is what makes this plant such a uniquely bad choice for residential landscapes. Gardeners plant it in a damp, shady spot, find the variegated foliage genuinely beautiful, and then discover the smell only when they brush against it while weeding, when their dog runs through it, or when summer rain releases the volatile oils into the surrounding air. By then, the plant has already spread several feet, and removing it triggers an even more intense release of the odor, sometimes lasting for weeks after the disturbance. Houtunia is sometimes marketed under more appealing names like ground cover chameleon or rainbow plant, and the catalog's descriptions almost never mention the smell or the aggressive spreading habit. Read every plant label carefully. If you see Houtunia cordata in any cultivar including the popular chameleon variety, walk away. There is no scenario in which planting this in a residential garden ends well. If you want colorful variegated foliage for a damp, shady area, coral bells, brunera, or Japanese painted fern all provide gorgeous color variation without any of the aggressive habit or the smell. Choose any of those instead. Plant 5, Obedient Plant Physostegia virginiana. This is, by a meaningful margin, the most ironically named perennial in the entire American nursery trade. The common name comes from a quirk of the flowers, which can be temporarily pushed sideways on their stems and will remain in the position you place them, like obedient little toys. That single quirk is essentially the only thing about this plant that is in any way obedient. Everything else about it is aggressively, uncontrollably, infuriatingly unruly. Obedient plant is native to North America and hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9, which means it grows successfully essentially anywhere on the continent. The flowers are genuinely beautiful, tall spires of pink, lavender, or white tubular blooms in late summer and early fall, exactly when most gardens are running out of color. That beauty is what convinces gardeners to plant it in the first place. The trouble begins immediately afterward. The plant spreads through aggressive underground rhizomes that send out new shoots in every direction throughout the growing season. A single starter plant can produce a colony 6 to 8 feet across by the end of its second season, displacing neighboring perennials, invading nearby lawn areas, and pushing through the edges of garden beds into adjacent walkways. The spread is fast enough that gardeners who plant obedient plant in spring are sometimes already trying to control it by the following summer. The above-ground habit makes the problem worse. The stems are tall, often 3 to 4 feet at maturity, but the structure is weak. Late summer rainstorms or strong winds will flop the entire planting over sideways onto neighboring plants, smothering whatever is underneath. Staking is essentially required to keep the plants upright, and even with staking, the floppy habit makes the planting look untidy throughout the bloom period. If you genuinely love the look of obedient plant and want to grow it responsibly, plant it in a contained area with hard edges on all sides, similar to the containment approach for mint, and accept that you will be dividing and reducing the clump every single year to keep it in bounds. Or more realistically, plant the cultivar Miss Manners, which is the only commercially available variety with a non-spreading clumping habit. Miss Manners stays where you put it, blooms as beautifully as the wild type, and does not require constant management. If your garden center cannot get Miss Manners specifically, plant something else. 5 plants in, and if even one of these is currently growing in your garden, do me one favor right now before plant number 6. Subscribe to this channel, not at the end of the video. Now, because the gardeners who subscribe in the middle of a video are statistically the ones who actually act on the information. They are the ones whose yards are visibly different next season. The button is right below the video. Plant 6, Plume Poppy, Maclea cordata. One of the most architecturally dramatic perennials commonly available in the nursery trade, with enormous lobed blue-green leaves up to 10 inches across, creamy white plume-like flower clusters, towering 7 to 8 feet tall, and an overall presence that genuinely commands attention in any garden where it is planted. And one of the fastest, most uncontrollable spreaders on this entire list. Plume Poppy is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 8, and spreads through an extensive underground rhizome system that extends 10 to 15 feet outward from each established plant per year. New shoots appear in every direction simultaneously, often dozens of them in a single season, each one becoming a full-sized plant within one growing year. What started as a single starter pot at the back of a perennial border becomes a forest of 8-foot-tall stems, occupying an entire corner of the yard within 3 years. The size of the plant is part of what makes it so frustrating. A small spreader, a ground cover, or a low perennial is as annoying but manageable. Plume Poppy is enormous. Each individual shoot grows quickly to several feet tall, with thick, fleshy stems that are physically difficult to remove. Trying to cut back a plume poppy colony with hand tools is genuinely strenuous physical work, and the colony regrows from the underground rhizomes within weeks. There is one additional concern that catches many gardeners by surprise. The sap of plume poppy is yellow-orange and contains alkaloids that can cause skin irritation in sensitive individuals. Cutting back the stems releases this sap onto your gloves, your forearms, and your clothing. The irritation is not severe, but it is unpleasant, and it adds another layer of resistance to the already difficult job of controlling the plant. If you genuinely love the architectural look of plume poppy and have a large naturalistic area at the back of the property where unrestricted spread is acceptable, the plant can work in that specific context. In a typical residential garden, in a border, or anywhere within reasonable distance of neighbors, the plant is a long-term mistake. For similar dramatic foliage at a manageable size, consider ornamental rhubarb, large hostas like Sum and Substance, or hardy banana for warmer zones. All three provide bold presence without the colonizing habit. Plant 7, Sweet Autumn Clematis, Clematis terniflora. This is the one I told you would change everything. Pay close attention. Because of all the plants on this entire list, this is the one most gardeners are currently growing without realizing what they actually have, and the one that causes the most quiet, gradual, surprising damage in residential gardens across the country. Sweet Autumn Clematis is a flowering vine hardy in USDA zones 4 through 9, and in early September it produces some of the most enchanting flower displays available in any American garden. Thousands of small star-shaped pure white flowers, intensely fragrant with a vanilla honey sweetness that carries across the entire yard in the evening air, blanketing a fence, an arbor, or a trellis in what looks like a cascading cloud of snow. The catalog photographs of sweet autumn clematis in bloom are some of the most seductive images in all of perennial gardening, and there is genuinely nothing else that produces this exact effect in early fall. The trouble is everything that happens around that brief moment of beauty. Sweet autumn clematis is one of the most aggressive vining plants available in the trade. Each plant produces dozens of long, flexible stems each year, climbing through, over, and around any structure or other plant within reach. The vine has no respect for ornamental plantings, healthy trees, prized shrubs, or anything else in its path. It simply climbs whatever is closest, and once it climbs into a host plant, it gradually smothers the host beneath its own weight. Mature shrubs have been killed by sweet autumn clematis growing through them, slowly blocking the host plant's access to sunlight over a period of years. Small trees have been pulled over and broken by the accumulated weight of mature clematis growth. The plant also self-seeds prolifically. The fluffy decorative seed heads that follow the flowers in October are exactly what makes the plant so romantic in autumn photographs, and they are also exactly what makes the plant so invasive. Each seed head contains dozens of seeds, each one capable of germinating in any open soil. By the second or third year, you have sweet autumn clematis seedlings appearing in flower beds across your yard, in the cracks of your patio, in your gravel driveway, and along your foundation. In many states across the Southeast, the plant is now classified as a naturalized invasive species that has escaped cultivation and established itself in surrounding wild lands. If you have sweet autumn clematis on your property and you do not want to remove it, at minimum cut all flower stems off before the seed heads form in late October. That single annual pruning, performed reliably every fall, dramatically slows the seedling problem while preserving the bloom display. If you want the look of a fragrant white-flowered fall vine without the destructive habit, consider native species of clematis like Clematis virginiana, which is similar in appearance but significantly less aggressive in spread. Tell me honestly in the comments below. Of the 7 plants we have covered so far, how many do you currently have in your garden, and how long have you been fighting them? The honest answers from the community on this channel are some of the most valuable content under any video, and your reply helps every gardener who finds this video after you. Plant 8, ribbon grass, Phalaris arundinacea picta. The variegated ornamental grass with bright white and green striped foliage, sold as a striking specimen plant for sunny borders and as a colorful ground cover for difficult dry areas. Beautiful in catalog photographs, dramatic in early summer, and one of the most aggressive ornamental grasses ever introduced to the residential nursery trade. Ribbon grass spreads through an extensive underground rhizome system at a rate comparable to running bamboo, with new shoots appearing several feet from the parent clump in a single growing season. The spread is fast enough that even gardeners who initially appreciate the bright, variegated foliage usually begin trying to control the plant by the second year, and find that control is essentially impossible without complete containment or complete removal. The above-ground habit makes the problem worse than the spread alone. Ribbon grass tends to flop in midsummer heat, losing its upright structure entirely and lying down across whatever neighboring plants happen to be growing nearby. The flopping spreads the foliage horizontally, shading out the plants underneath, and effectively expanding the colony's footprint even within a single growing season. By late summer, what was a tidy clump of bright variegated grass in May has become a sprawling, messy carpet covering an area 3 or 4 times larger. And here is the part that makes ribbon grass particularly insidious. The plant readily escapes cultivation and naturalizes into surrounding wild lands, particularly along stream banks, ditches, and damp areas. Once it establishes in a natural waterway, it displaces native vegetation, alters water flow, and degrades habitat for native fish and wildlife. Several state environmental agencies now classify ribbon grass as an invasive species and actively discourage residential plantings, particularly in properties adjacent to natural waterways. If you want a striking variegated ornamental grass for a sunny border, choose variegated maiden grass, Miscanthus sinensis variegatus, which provides similar dramatic foliage in a well-behaved clumping form, or choose the variegated form of featherreed grass, Calamagrostis overdam. Both offer the visual appeal of ribbon grass without the aggressive spread or the environmental damage. Plant 9, Gooseneck loosestrife, Lysimachia clethroides. The plant with one of the most distinctive flower shapes in all of garden horticulture, producing curving white flower spikes that arch elegantly to one side, all of them somehow leaning the same direction at the same time, like a flock of small white birds with their necks all pointing in unison. The visual effect of a mature Gooseneck loosestrife colony in mid-July bloom is genuinely striking, and the plant photographs beautifully. The aggression of the same plant beneath the soil is what makes gardeners curse the day they planted it. Gooseneck loosestrife is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 8 and spreads through a dense network of underground rhizomes that extend several feet outward from each plant per year. A small starter clump becomes a substantial colony by year 2, an aggressive invasion by year 3, and a complete takeover by year 5. The plant outcompetes neighboring perennials through sheer root density, blocking access to water and nutrients, and physically pushing other plants aside as the rhizomes expand. What makes the spread particularly aggravating is the depth of the rhizomes. While bishop's weed and other surface spreaders can sometimes be controlled with shallow excavation and persistent removal, Gooseneck loosestrife rhizomes commonly extend 12 to 18 inches deep, well below the depth most gardeners are willing to dig. Hand removal at typical garden tool depth captures only the upper portion of the system, and the deeper sections regenerate the colony within months. There is an additional aesthetic problem that catches gardeners by surprise. Gooseneck loosestrife foliage develops dark, unsightly leaf spots and discoloration in late summer, often by August in most regions, and the plant looks tired and ragged for several weeks before the foliage finally dies back in fall. The brief July bloom period is bracketed by long stretches of unattractive foliage on either side, and the trade-off is rarely worth the brief beauty. If you want elegant white flower spikes in midsummer without the aggressive habit, consider Russian sage, veronicastrum, or Culver's root. All three provide vertical white or pale flower presence without the invasive root system. Plant Gooseneck loosestrife only in a fully contained location, such as a buried bottomless container, or accept that you are committing to ongoing aggressive control for the entire time you own the property. Plant 10, Crown Vetch, Corynea varia, sometimes still sold under the older name Securigera varia. Marketed for decades as the perfect solution for problem slopes, eroding banks, and difficult dry sunny areas where lawn will not grow. Praised for its pink and white flower clusters that bloom heavily in early summer, its dense ground-covering habit, and its ability to thrive in poor soil. And classified as one of the most damaging invasive ground covers ever introduced to the eastern United States. Crown Vetch was originally promoted by highway departments and erosion control specialists across America starting in the 1950s, sold as a low-maintenance solution for the steep-cut banks created by interstate highway construction. The plant performed exactly as advertised in those specific conditions, providing fast, dense coverage that genuinely stabilized soil and required no mowing or maintenance. The unintended consequence is that Crown Vetch then escaped from those highway plantings into every adjacent ecosystem within reach and has spent the last 70 years displacing native plants across millions of acres of the eastern United States. In residential settings, Crown Vetch behaves exactly the same way. The plant spreads through underground rhizomes and through prolific self-seeding, with each established plant capable of producing thousands of seeds per year. Within a few seasons of planting, Crown Vetch will have moved into surrounding lawn areas, climbed into shrub plantings, swallowed small trees, and crossed property lines into neighboring yards. The dense growth habit smothers everything underneath, eliminating biodiversity in any area where it establishes itself. Removing crown vetch from a residential property is a multi-year project requiring repeated herbicide application, persistent mechanical removal, and ongoing monitoring for new seedlings emerging from the soil seed bank, which can remain viable in the ground for 10 years or more after the parent plants are gone. There is no quick solution. If you have a problem slope and need erosion control, native alternatives perform the same function without the invasive consequences. Native sedges, native fern species, native wildflower meadow mixes, and even native ground cover shrubs like creeping juniper or low-growing native viburnums all stabilize slopes effectively while supporting rather than destroying surrounding ecosystems. Talk to your state cooperative extension office for region-specific recommendations. Skip crown vetch entirely. 10 plants in, and if you have made it this far, you are clearly serious about not making any more long-term planting mistakes. That is exactly the kind of gardener this channel is built for. Subscribe right now if you have not already, and hit the bell so the next video, which goes even deeper into what you should plant instead of these, actually finds you when it drops. Plant 11 Comfrey, Symphytum officinale. The plant traditionally promoted by organic gardening publications and permaculture writers as a miracle perennial, valued for its mineral-rich leaves that can be cut for compost activator, mulch, and natural fertilizer. The plant with attractive purple, bell-shaped flowers in late spring and bold textured foliage that genuinely contributes to the look of a cottage-style garden. And one of the most permanent planting decisions you will ever make in your gardening life. Comfrey is hardy in USDA zones 3 through 9 and grows successfully in nearly every condition, from full sun to deep shade, from dry soil to wet, from poor to rich. The plant produces a deep, thick, fleshy taproot that can extend 3 to 5 feet straight down into the soil, sometimes deeper in loose, loamy conditions. That taproot is what gives Comfrey its remarkable resilience, drought tolerance, and longevity. It is also what makes the plant essentially impossible to remove once it has been allowed to establish. Cutting Comfrey back to the ground does nothing meaningful to the underground portion of the plant. The taproot regrows new foliage within weeks. Digging the plant out requires reaching the entire length of the taproot, which at 3 to 5 feet deep is well beyond what any hand tool can accomplish without major excavation. And here is the part that makes Comfrey particularly unforgiving. The plant regenerates from root fragments. Any small piece of root left in the soil during a removal attempt, even a fragment an inch long, will sprout an entirely new plant within months. The standard advice from frustrated gardeners who have tried to remove established Comfrey is that the only reliable method is heavy equipment excavation to a depth of at least 4 feet with subsequent monitoring of the disturbed area for several years. The plant also self-seeds modestly, sending up volunteers throughout the surrounding garden over time, each of which then develops its own deep, unmovable taproot system. Within 10 years of an original planting, a single Comfrey plant becomes a small colony of plants, each one nearly as permanent as a small tree. If you find the agricultural arguments for Comfrey compelling, plant the cultivar Bocking 14, which is a sterile hybrid that produces no viable seeds and therefore does not spread outside its original planting location. The cultivar still develops the same deep taproot, so it is still permanent in place, but at least it does not multiply across the garden over time. Choose this cultivar specifically. Plant it in a location where you will be genuinely happy with it for the next 20 years, and consider the location decision carefully before you put it in the ground. Comfrey is not a casual planting choice. Now here is the question that matters most after all of this. If these plants are this troublesome, if they cause this much regret in the gardeners who plant them, why are they still sold openly at garden centers across 3 countries? The answer is straightforward, and it explains everything else about how the residential nursery trade operates. Garden centers make their highest profit margins on plants that look stunning in spring when customers are most motivated to buy, and that perform reliably in their first season. Almost every plant on this list looks absolutely magnificent in the first year. Mint looks lush and fragrant in May. Ribbon grass produces bright variegated foliage immediately. Sweet autumn clematis blooms in heavy fragrant clouds by the 1st September. Plume poppy reaches dramatic size in a single growing season. The catalog photograph, the May display table, and the customer's first-year experience all point toward a successful planting decision. The problems begin in year 2, year 3, and beyond, by which point the customer has long since left the garden center, and the original sale has been forgotten by the seller. There is no commercial incentive for nurseries to warn customers about aggressive habits that emerge years after the sale. The customer is not coming back to complain about a problem they did not yet have at the point of purchase. The plants are sold, the season ends, and the cycle repeats with new customers next spring. That is the entire system as it currently exists, and it is exactly why content like this video matters. The information has to come from somewhere, and the only realistic somewhere is fellow gardeners, sharing what they have actually learned from years of personal experience. 3 rules will save you years of regret across your entire gardening lifetime. Most gardening content skips all 3. Rule 1. Research the long-term behavior of every plant before you buy it, not just its first-year appearance. Before any new plant goes into your cart, take 30 seconds with your phone and search the botanical name along with the word invasive, or aggressive, or the phrase mature behavior. Real gardeners on forums and gardening websites have documented years of personal experience with nearly every plant in the trade, and that collective knowledge is freely available. 30 seconds of honest research can prevent a planting decision you will fight for the next decade. Rule 2. When you find a plant you love, ask specifically whether a clumping or non-spreading cultivar exists. For nearly every aggressive plant on this list, plant breeders have developed better-behaved versions in the last 20 years. Miss Manner's obedient plant, clumping bamboo varieties, the sterile Bocking 14 comfrey, Walker's low catmint instead of more aggressive mint species. Asking the question at the garden center rather than accepting the first variety offered often produces a dramatically better long-term outcome. Rule 3. If you do plant something with known aggressive habits, install containment at the time of planting, not after the problem appears. Bottomless containers, buried rhizome barriers, dedicated isolated beds with hard edges. Whatever the appropriate containment is for the specific plant, install it the day you plant. Trying to install containment after a plant has been growing for 3 years and has already spread underground is essentially impossible. The time to control an aggressive perennial is before it ever has a chance to spread. You just spent 35 minutes learning 11 plants that the garden center industry will happily sell you again next spring, with no warning, with no disclosure, with no acknowledgement of the years of frustration you would be signing yourself up for. That is the entire reason this video exists. The information was never going to come from the people selling the plants. It has to come from gardeners talking to other gardeners. Share this video with anyone you know who is starting a garden this season, anyone who recently moved to a new house with mature plantings, and anyone who has been complaining about a plant they cannot get rid of. They probably have at least one of these in their yard right now, and they will recognize it the moment they hear it described. Subscribe to this channel so the next video, which covers 11 well-behaved perennials that look just as beautiful as these 11 do without any of the regret, finds you when it drops. The gardeners who consistently make good planting decisions are the ones who consistently consume good gardening information. Drop one comment below before you go. Tell me which plant from this list you are currently growing, and tell me how long it has been bothering you. I read every single comment, and your answer directly shapes what I cover next. This is your garden. This is your year to stop making the same mistakes everyone else makes. Go pull something out.